For joining us. My name is Michael Lonnan, and I am the Public Sector Marketing Manager at HSO. And I have the dubious honour of introducing today's session. Thank you for taking, hopefully it's not your lunch break, but thank you for taking time to join us. We've got a good amount of content to get through today. Some of it, or most of it, I think you'll find particularly interesting and very, very relevant. And we'll share the recordings and we'll share the slides afterwards, so you get the full value afterwards. And what I'll also do is I will find you. I will find you in LinkedIn and I will connect with you if you're there. So when I do share a lot of information, a lot of good stuff around some of the work that HSO is doing in the public sector, so you'll see some of that. So I'll find you, connect with you. So don't be afraid when you see my name pop up. I'll also put my name and Andy's name into the chat in just a second, so you can connect with us there. So I will hand over now to Andy. Andy heads up our public sector practice at HSO. Andy really is the brains of the bunch. Andy has been here, there, and ever. Andy knows public sector inside and out, and Andy's a top chap. So without further ado, I'm going to let Andy pick up the content, and he will iterate this. But what we're going to do is, because there's quite a lot of content, if you do have any questions on any of the aspects and elements that Andy starts to pick through as we go through, post them up in the chat. At some point, either during the session, we'll get to them and we'll answer them, or I'll take them away and I'll come back to, we'll come back to you and we'll answer them separately. So don't be afraid to ask questions, but please do put them in the chat and we'll capture those. So without further ado and less gabbing, over to the main man, Andy himself, and he'll take you through the session.
Thank you, Michael. Very kind words. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Andy Venture, Head of Public Sector at HSO, as Michael mentions. I've been at HSO for about 12 months. Before that, I had spent quite a few years at Microsoft, and before that, a long time at Oracle. Please don't keep that against me. As Michael mentions, there's a lot of content today. It is a bit content heavy, so I'm going to try and go through the slides fairly quickly. Conscious that there may be some questions. What we would ask you is, please, as Michael says, post the questions in the chat. If we can, we'll try and get to them towards the end of the session. If we don't have time, we'll to you on that, if that's okay. So let me jump in. Hopefully the technology is going to behave. The backdrop for today's session is around the Socitm Digital Trends Guide for 2023. And hopefully you've all seen it. I've put a link into the chat, into the slides as well anyway, so you guys can access it afterwards if you haven't seen it. Really a very interesting document and paper by Socitm. I think for me the key things around this one, in looking at some of the external drivers, we know a lot has happened over the last few years. What are those sort of external drivers influencing in terms of trends, and then obviously using technology as an enabler. And that's a key focus. Technology is just an enabler to try and help with the trends. I've pulled out sort of three key topics from the sort of digital trends there. I think none of this is really new as such, but I think there is a bit of an emphasis focus on this today. So data silos, common challenge, been a challenge across public sector for a long time. I think a lot more focus on that one and seeing how new technologies can help with that. Faster development, so really looking at the sort of the world of low code development, and how it can actually enable councils and public sector more widely to be able to react to changes more quickly, especially again on the back of something like COVID as well. And finally, given all this new technology, what does that look like in terms of impacting on customer services, and how can that change that going forward? So those are the three things that I wanted to call out, like I say, and like I say, we'll try and cover some of that as we sort of go through the slides. Now, in terms of what we'll be covering, three key topics for us today around modernizing service delivery. The first one is looking at a couple of trends that we've spotted sort of happening over the last few years around leveraging existing investments with Microsoft technologies, how we are seeing councils adopting accelerators to try and drive that time to value, and how that is a real key differentiator in terms of budget constraints, etc. And then finally, sharing with you guys some approaches to how we can help you support some of your decision making as well. Okay, so if we jump into the deep end, how to meet demands without significant extra investment. I think that's a really key topic for a lot of public sector organizations today, and as Socitm identified in the trends report as well. The use of technology across public sector is key going forward. There's no getting away from that. It's helping local authorities deliver more for less. And on that front, what are the blockers potentially that we are seeing, or the challenges faced around adopting some of these new ways of working? I've highlighted a couple of points on the screen, but again, I won't read all of them. One of the biggest one is around budget and time and resource constraints. We are seeing a lot of challenges around resources, especially. The new ways of working, hybrid working, etc., allows people to actually more easily work across new organizations, including private sector as well. What's the impact of that? Paper and complexity around processes, often a blocker as well when you're trying to automate something or trying to modernize something, being able to sort of account for that inside the technology. Legacy systems, challenge that still exists across public sector. A lot of change has happened over the last few years around moving to software as a service, etc., but legacy systems still float around. And finally, integrating data across the organization as well, and how to make that easier. So what are the trends that we're seeing? So three key trends that we are starting to identify. The first one is around business application platforms. There seems to be a little bit more of a move towards that. And again, it's not a one size fits all. It's not we're going to throw all our eggs in one basket with one technology provider, but we are starting to see a lot more sort of focus around that. We're looking at, what technologies are being used inside the organization that can be leveraged further. Also, the adoption of low code, and that includes things like automation as well. And then finally, like I said, that cross-organizational data. Whether we talk about a golden record or a single citizen record, etc., there seems to be a lot more focus on that. But then again, it's not an easy challenge to solve, but I think there is a big focus around that one. So before we jump into those trends, just wanted to touch on the application platform for a second. And again, we are a Microsoft partner, so the session is a little bit biased toward Microsoft today, but potentially some of this is translatable into other technologies as well. If you look at the Microsoft platform, there are a lot of investment already across Azure for a lot of customers. Microsoft 365, again, big investment in that one. I think most public sector organizations use Microsoft 365, including Teams, like we are using today. Very common is also the integration platform across the Microsoft technologies as well. Sometimes there are differences, but a lot of times customers do use that one. A key component across the platform is that common data model and custom entities, so actually having all the data in a single place. Where it becomes a bit more interesting is the three little circles on the left-hand side. So the first one is a business application, Dynamics 365. Obviously, that covers both front and back office. And really the key thing there is that this is technology that Microsoft is developing themselves on their own platform. Okay, if we go to the next one, App Source, this really is where partners are using, again, that same technology to actually develop solutions as well, allowing you to have a single common data model, single platform, but it allows partners to actually develop niche solutions where possible. A really good one, for example, is in police. There's a partner called Valrada. They built a rostering application using Power Platform. Guess what? It perfectly fits and integrates back into Dynamics. And if we look at the final bubble there, Power Platform, again, this is customers being able to actually build applications themselves. And again, the key thing here is all four of those bubbles at the top all work together, integrated out of the box, all sitting on top of that common data model, using a single integration platform, all sitting on top of Azure. Like I say, this is something that we're seeing more and more. If I think about BCP, Bournemouth Christchurch Pool, they actually looked at this and they're on that journey now to actually consume that single platform where possible. And for them, the winner here was a single platform across 5 technology layers. So if you talk about infrastructure integration, data analytics, the front and back office, and then also finally productivity as well. Like I say, so for them, when they looked at the benefits and the value, it really stacked up for them. And hence they've gone down that route. And like I say, it doesn't mean that you're going to put everything onto a single platform. It just means where it makes sense. And when you have a Microsoft First policy, this is a good way to sort of consider your journey. Next one, low-code adoption. And this really is the Power Platform suite of things. Inside the box, Power Apps allows customers to obviously build applications and act on requirements. Power Automate, big focus, especially when you start looking at process automation, process efficiencies. Virtual agents interacting with citizens, obviously a big component as well. Power Pages, fairly new. I think it used to be portals before. And again, this is creating sort of websites that are fully integrated back into the Microsoft stack. And finally, Power BI. So obviously, you guys will be quite familiar with that one for reporting analytics. Okay. Now, when you look at low code, low code does not have to mean low quality or low complexity. I think that's a very key quote. A lot of times low code is associated with citizen developer. I know a lot of folks don't like that terminology. And actually, it's more than that. It can be adopted across the organization. And if I sort of load this diagram very quickly, with the right sort of governance and the right framework, it can be adopted across the organization, across the three landing pages. One is productivity tools. That's typically where we would see the citizen developer tools. We also see it across business applications. More and more councils are actually starting to use it for that purpose. It can also be used for critical workloads as well. Okay. When you're thinking about those three landing pages and you think about sort of low-code adoption, the key thing to think about is how do you actually land that inside the organization and manage that effectively. So if we think about those three landing pages, productivity, as I mentioned, that's very typically with the sort of the citizen developer label on. Simple workloads. For example, if I create an automated task internally when an attachment lands in my inbox in Outlook, that attachment is automatically saved to, for example, a SharePoint. Okay. If we talk about important workloads, like I say, for example, if you think about Blue Badge, or if I think about some work we're doing in police at the moment on bail applications, that's a very important workload. It's blessed by IT, but still owned by somebody that actually is not a full-on developer. And finally, if you start thinking about critical workloads, obviously that becomes a little bit more complex, a lot more focus from IT around that one and the adoption of that one. Okay. So if you think about it in a slightly different way as well, think about the data sources, but also think about who actually manages it. You'll see that when you start talking about sort of that productivity side of things, data sources like Excel and SharePoint is fine for that one. You find that also with that one, IT is less worried about that one. What they do is they really restrict what the business can do in that sense, and therefore they don't have to spend a lot of time managing that. If we start thinking about the critical workloads, obviously a lot more important for the organization. And actually, you'll find that that's where IT spends a lot more time, a little bit more flexibility, but that means that they do need to sort of keep an eye on it a lot more. And this is where you start getting a bit more interesting around the data sources. Dataverse, obviously, very common use case across public sector now, but oftentimes Dataverse isn't scalable when you start looking at some of those critical workloads, more complex workloads, and therefore you maybe want to start looking at Azure data services, for example. Okay. So really key to think about the adoption of low code and how it's going to affect the organization and also the support internally. When you start talking about data, some of you may have seen this, Microsoft fondly refers to this as a digital feedback loop. Really what this all talks about is how can you leverage data across the organization to make better informed decisions, okay? And this is customer data, it's talking about people data internally and actually empowering your employees. It's also about how you can transform services and actually working with the data to understand how that's possible, and also very largely around optimization of operations as well. So really starting to look at process efficiencies. If we think about a typical structure around data environments, you see these sort of three blocks. One is the source data. Other sources can include anything, for example, Oracle databases, etc., but also Microsoft. If you think about general IT, all the stuff in the middle around sort of organizational data services, Excel spreadsheets, etc. And then finally, it's trying to make sense of that data on the right-hand side by reporting tools, for example, like Power BI, and very often Excel as well. Slightly different look at the same diagram is actually if you start breaking it down. Sources are still on the left-hand side, but in the middle now you have ingest, store, and model. And what you'll find is that if you try and translate that into a typical sort of data warehouse environment for organizations, it will look something like this one. So if you think about the ingest, this is all about the data feeds, store, maybe you're looking at Azure Data Lake around that one. The modeling, Synapse is becoming a lot more popular, but also sort of the data warehouse side of things, and then piping that information out into the right-hand side, again, for the reporting purposes. Now, technologies around data is evolving, and again, a lot of customers are starting to leverage this a lot more effective. I think for us, so there's three sizes, more or less, around some of the Microsoft stack. At the top is serverless Synapse. This is a very cost-effective way to be able to start creating a sort of very simple warehouse. Medium-sized dedicated SQL, and finally Synapse EDW. Obviously, each of these comes with different complexity, different budgets, etc. What we have done at HSO, we've actually looked at serverless Synapse as a quick way for organizations to get on the board. you're looking at actually deploying something like this that deals with the ingest, store, and model side of things very quickly. We've deployed this across customers in weeks, not months. And obviously, as you can imagine, also the budget is very favorable around this one as well. So this is something to think about. Summary slide, and I'm going to read all the questions, but really what I want to leave you after this section is to really think about, when is the last time you guys have updated your technology and data strategies? We know the pace of change around this stuff is fast. And again, therefore, it's almost a constant. It has to be living documents these days. Is application rationalization on the agenda? It is for a lot of public sector organizations and especially in local government as well. If it is a question, is there something that we can do to help around that one? Data, are you using data effectively across the organization? I think most folks will say yes, but oftentimes, like I say, when you do assessment, you may find that there's always room for improvement. Backlog around development, big challenge for a lot of councils today. Can't keep up with the demand coming from the business. What does your backlog look like, and where do you want to focus your time and effort? And then, like I say, also reacting to change as well. I think it's been a common sort of phrase now for a number of years, change is the only constant. Okay. So that a little bit around some of the trends, like I said, and again, just to summarize that before I go to the accelerators, again, it's looking at application platform. Where does that make sense? Bringing technologies together, leveraging that scale of economies, data integration, etc., but also the sort of the resources internally as well. Again, simplifying your IT estate could be helpful. Adoption of low code, it's only going to go one way going forward. And finally, data, how to actually be more effective with data. So thinking about those three things, next section we'll talk about accelerators. This is a quote from Local Government Association. I think collaboration across public sector, I think, is really important going forward. I think it's the only way that we can really leverage the economies of scale. It's also a way for us to stop actually trying to reinvent the wheel every single time, but also recognizing, again, one size does not fit all. So, how can we leverage accelerators to actually drive some time to value? So we've started developing a catalog of accelerators. This is the non-exhaustive list, but just some examples to call out on this one. First of all, if you think about something like Homes for Ukraine, and we'll go into a bit more detail, this is actually saying everybody has the same challenge. How can we actually leverage work that's been done in collaboration by a number of councils to actually find a single solution that will meet most of your requirements, if not all? Okay. It's also about looking at things like starters, levers, and movers. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And at the top, it's all the way through to, for example, finance accelerators as well. How can you actually deliver systems far quicker and not have to pay for the full solution every single time? With that in mind, we talked a little bit about, when we talked about low code, we talked about productivity. Here's an example of an accelerator around productivity. And again, this is something fairly simple. In this case, it's actually using your full Microsoft suite. Microsoft's got an AI builder, an OCR scanner that's actually now been developed a lot more than it has been before, and training that to actually be able to automatically scan and notice an invoice that comes into your inbox. Power Automate can then take that invoice, it can automate that and actually push the information into your ERP system. In this case, we're referencing Dynamics. At the same time, actually notify the accounts payable team in Teams to let them know that there's an invoice that needs to be received and approved. Once approved, it can send a workflow approval through the system. And finally, it can then actually archive or save that attachment into something like SharePoint. A really simple use case, but actually very, very effective. And you think about productivity, that potentially could have quite a significant impact to the organization. Just switch my slides. We briefly touched on Homes for Ukraine, for example. The HSO version of that one is click to place. A number of councils, including South Gloss Council and Brent, are using this one. And really what we've done here is that at HSO, we've realized that we do have to give back to public sector as well. And working with Microsoft, what we did is we actually created a solution around Homes for Ukraine. We then made that available via the Microsoft Change Agent program on GitHub. This is free to download by all councils, so you can simply go onto GitHub, download the code, and then deploy it. If you have the resources in-house to sort of configure that to meet your exact requirements, no cost to you at all. If you did need a bit of additional hand, obviously we can support that. But this is a great example of collaboration. And again, like I say, partners actually recognizing that, they need to give something back to authorities as well. Okay, and this focus here, like I said, this is on building IP that can be leveraged by councils. And if you go to GitHub, there's a lot of examples on GitHub in this space for you guys. Think about something that's slightly more complex, like levers and movers management. Again, what HSO has done in this case is we've actually built an accelerator around this one. And then what we did is, for example, at Birmingham, we've engaged with them using that accelerator and actually looking at their environment, which is slightly more complex than the accelerator that we've built. So really the point about this one is the co-design, right? It's identifying the use case of the councils and saying, can we meet 60, 70, 80% of the requirements out of the standard, out of the box accelerator, or is there a bit of co-design work to make it specific to the organizational need? Starters, levers, and movers tends to be slightly more complex with different systems to integrate into and outcomes to achieve. And therefore, like I say, this is a really good example of the council didn't have to build this entire process from scratch. Leveraging the HSO accelerator, they were able to actually meet quite a lot of the requirements. And then it's just the last mile that needs to be configured. Other examples in our sort of HR side of things, we also have a people accelerator, and this actually includes, again, the same concept of starters, levers, and movers, where we can start looking at medical records, we can start looking at work groups, personal statuses, etc. All of this, like I say, is built around the Power Platform, Microsoft Power Platform, and like I say, it can leverage existing investments where possible. And again, it's about driving very quick time to value. This is a slightly more interesting one. I don't know how many of you are aware of the Microsoft Government Accelerator that exists. I think Microsoft's been quite keen to promote this over the last sort of few months. What this really is Microsoft has actually built a blueprint around data models specific to public sector with a common data model that will integrate across different programs and services for councils. And again, it's trying to allow quick adoption of the Microsoft technologies into customer service for public sector. The key thing around this one for me, not only is it around a common data model, but actually also it's about leveraging the technology in the right way. You'll see that this is built around Microsoft Power Platform and Microsoft Dynamics 365. For a lot of councils, going full Dynamics 365 can become a bit expensive. By actually combining Dynamics 365 with Power Platform, not only can this actually drive time to value in terms of the build cost around customer services, but it also actually creates a more cost-effective model around licensing as well. Again, there's no one size fits all. We need to make sure that we are looking at individual customers' requirements, identifying what the right solutions for them are. But like I say, overall, this really is about providing a solution that's a lot quicker for councils to adopt. Slide just stopped working there for a second. If I give you a couple of examples of what that looks like, and again, very configurable because it's all around the Power Platform low-code from Microsoft. But here's an example that's been created, and you can see this is a common landing page, common look and feel across service lines. In this case, the examples include environmental, license, permit, housing, etc. If you click through to the next page, for example, around housing, in this case, the example there is around eviction prevention, and a customer can actually click on that and actually populate their profile. Now, this is again trying to leverage that common data model in the background, so that actually it's making headway towards that single common data model across the organization. If I think about some of the work that we're doing, and this is an invitation, we are working with South Gloucestershire Council on this at the moment, very much focusing on feedback and requests. So we're looking at complaints and suggestions and compliments, but we're also looking at, for example, freedom of information as well. And like I said, this is building on top of the Microsoft Government Accelerator using the HSO enhancements. And this is, like I said, the invitation there is collaboration. South Gloucestershire Council is very happy for any other councils to join us to collaborate in terms of how this can be leveraged across other organizations as well. The nice thing about that one, it's about sharing information, but also it's about driving economies of scale as well, so make it a lot more cost effective for other councils to adopt it. So if this is of interest, give us a shout afterwards. Okay. We also have finance accelerators as well. And again, this is very focused on Dynamics. Again, we are a Microsoft house. But this is actually leveraging our best practice to be able to accelerate the adoption of Dynamics for finance and operations as well. Pre-configured sandbox, out-of-the-box processes, and like I say, we have delivered this as quickly as 4 months, for example, if you think about London City Airport. So again, this is a really quick way for us to be able to help you guys on the journey. I'll skip this slide, but again, this is just a reminder. We also have an accelerator for the adoption of serverless signups as well. And again, this is weeks, not months, and not a lot of money. Right, next section, we'll talk about some of the tools we can help you on your journey. So again, if you think about making some of those informed decisions, having the right tools available to help you guys come to those decisions is always helpful. And when you think about, this quote from Tussle, since the pandemic, the investment in IT has gone up, partly because that has driven demand through the pandemic as well, but also in terms of being able to meet demands on internal resources. So a couple of things that we've built around this one, and a lot of these tool sets, by the way, can be funded by Microsoft. It's not always possible, but often case it can, and we've actually got quite a few examples of where we've leveraged this to drive some real value. So if I think about Kent, for example, we've leveraged the business process assessment at Kent Council. What this has done is actually identified a very clear journey for them to go on to be able to adopt low code in a much more structured and governed way. So what this assessment does, very briefly, it looks across the foundation for adoption of a low-code Microsoft low-code platform. It spans 5 key pillars: so platform management, enterprise architecture, application lifecycle, mature security models, and user empowerment. But it actually goes across those 22 elements. And like I say, what this report does, it actually takes the information, it measures that across the entire organization to give you a view around maturity of your organization against these components and how well aligned you are to be able to adopt Power Platform effectively. It is also about driving time to value as well and about return on investment. As part of that engagement, not only do we do an assessment across those key pillars for the adoption of Power Platform, but we also look at some of your backlog of workloads as well. And again, if you think about those landing pages, productivity, important and critical, we try and identify what are the right use cases for you guys to be able to drive quick time to value. So oftentimes low complexity but high impact use cases really is a good way to start adopting a Power Platform. And like I say, working with you, identify those, make sure you've got the right resources and the structure in place to be able to successfully then adopt the Power Platform suite. This one is about COE Starter Kit. I think a lot of you may have already deployed the Microsoft COE Starter Kit. It's a great starting point for a lot of organizations. It gets you going with the Microsoft toolset very quickly to start sort of monitoring and mapping. Oftentimes, though, you do find that the starter kit is not enough. Again, what we've done is we've actually developed an accelerator on top of that one to really focus on local authorities' adoption of the COE toolkit as well. Talked about data earlier on. We also have a data maturity assessment, and again, looking at server signups and some of the other key components as well. Really taking a look across the organization in terms of how can you be more effective with the adoption of data across the organization, and really start answering some of these key questions. Just traditionally, if you think about most organizations, when you're trying to run a business, you're very focused around what happened or why did it happen, but it's actually starting to look at more forward and leveraging some of those new technologies like AI, etc. Start identifying what will happen, what can you do about it, and how can you make key or positive decisions happen going forward. Slightly more complex if you start thinking about CRM or ERP replacements, a lot more involved, a much bigger process traditionally as well. It affects, in most cases, the entire organization. Again, this is something that can be funded by Microsoft. There's a partner that's CR365 that has developed a toolkit. It's like an online survey tool. And what it can do is to help you start gathering your requirements. Now, although the output of this report can be a little bit Microsoft focused, a lot of the content can be reused across other technologies as well. So I encourage you to have a look at this one. Like I say, it helps you gather requirements across the organization around your current as-is processes. It helps you to create sort of fit gap analysis across some of the technologies as well. And it really accelerates any sort of go-to-market activities that you may have. Some of the key outputs of this CR365 report, like I say, it's an online survey that you complete with assistance from CR365 or HSO's CR365 partner as well. So again, we can run this for you. Again, like I say, if you look at some of the key outputs, requirements gathering, we talked about that one. So really making sure that you capture the organization's must-haves, could-haves, etc. So MOSCA rating, define the scope of whatever replacement you want to have going forward. But more importantly, it also then starts to give you sort of a magnitude around implementation time and cost estimates as well. So if you think about some of those outlined business cases, gathering that information, going to the business and say, make a decision around change and have a really good understanding on the budget, very, very important as well. This can help you with that one. And again, like I say, Microsoft can fund this as well. Questions around this section, really, are you ready for change? I think that's always a good question. Change is never fully expected, but oftentimes, it needs must. Do you have all the information to be able to make the right decisions? I think a key component of what we talked about just now was making sure you have all the tools available to gather the right information. Identifying the key stakeholders, but also not just stakeholders, but also identify the resources required to be able to enable change as well. And again, a lot of those assessments do help you with that. And skill sets, big one. A lot of times do you need to backfill, etc. So being able to see that coming really helps you to make that decision in terms of your ability to affect change. Next session really is talking about HSO. I think for some, you may have seen the HSO brand. For others, we might be quite new. HSO has only been around public sector now for a couple of years. In that time, we've tried to have a big impact, really focused on trying to connect communities using transformative yet cost-effective technologies, for a mouthful. But really, that is true in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So we are not coming to you guys saying, build stuff from scratch every single time. What we're trying to do is really make sure that we look at your requirements, match it up with what the technologies you've already got in use today, and see how we can drive real value for you. In terms of who we are as an organization, funny enough, we've actually been aligned to Microsoft technologies for over 30 years. So we've been around the Microsoft space for a long time. We're a 100% focused Microsoft partner. Having said that, like I say, a lot of the assessments that we do can be extended beyond the Microsoft technologies. And like I say, being 100% Microsoft focused allows us to go very wide and very deep. We do service a lot of other industries as well, and we're actually starting to see that a lot of the information and the knowledge gathered from other industries are applicable to public sector as well, and especially local authorities. So bringing some of that experience across, very, very useful. Global organization, headquartered in Netherlands, but we've got 3 offices in the UK, Reading, Manchester, and Glasgow. And as you can see on the right-hand side, we've got all the badges that you need across the Microsoft stack. So fully certified, Inner Circle partner, etc. Inner Circle, by the way, all that means is that we adhere to Microsoft best practices, and we are accountable to Microsoft as well. And as you can expect on the bottom right-hand side, Crown Commercial Services Supply, ISO 27001 and Cyber Essentials Certified Plus as well. And then I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're also a huge investor in people as well. We believe that people is a very key asset to the organization, both in terms of us being successful, but also helping you guys to be successful as well. We do full stack. So, I talked a lot about Microsoft technologies today, but really we do anything from modern workplace, infrastructure, Azure, etc., full dynamic suite, so both front and back office. We do also do the data, BI, etc. side of things as well. So we've got a data practice in place. Like I just mentioned, we do the service sign-up stuff. We also have a managed services practice as well. So if you have any Microsoft technologies and you need a partner that you can trust to try and help you manage some of that, we can do all of that as well. And then finally, I mentioned it's sort of low code, big practice around low code as well, and doing a lot of really good stuff for customers in that space. We're also a very socially aware partner as well. So again, top quote there, Microsoft do trust us. They've seen the success that we've been able to enable on our customers. Big investment in people again. We do graduate and apprenticeship programs. We do a lot of giving back to both sort of charities as well as the environment, planting trees, etc. Key focus for us is around our people, as I mentioned previously. So, we do give birthdays off. We provide days of training. We've got diversity and inclusion teams, etc. We do a lot of active stuff around charities as well, so giving back to communities, really key part of our organization. And finally, as you'd expect, lots of green credentials as well, so certified carbon neutral, etc. As you'd expect. What does that mean for our customers? So briefly on that one. So if you think about innovation, we are so focused around the technology, we're at the forefront of innovation for our customers. We focus on making sure that the technologies that we deliver are accessible. We do try and give back around education as well. So, for example, we run the Microsoft Power BI training days. We actually run that on behalf of Microsoft. Sustainability, massive. You've already seen the carbon neutral stuff, and obviously finally social responsibility. We really try and be sure that we are a very inclusive organization. And I think I'm ahead of time. Wow.
You're miles ahead of time, Andy. I've got a
I
couple
was
of
worried I was
questions
going to
here.
run out of time, Michael.
No, I
So
didn't
I
think you
tried to
were.
go quick.
It's very good. If anyone wants to pose any questions, put them in the chat or come offline. But I will cut the questions here for Andy while people cogitate that. So in terms of maximizing value from your technology and speeding up deployment and such, or getting more value from it, what happens for those organizations that have which most people will hear, have a vast array of different vendor type technologies, or just different technologies? How does that work in terms of using things like accelerators to get more value?
You've just frozen, Michael. Is that a question for me?
It was a question for you, yeah. Which bit of it did I cut out on?
Um,
I'll restate
yeah,
it, don't worry. Go
I
on.
got distracted by that beautiful picture. You've actually got both hands up. I don't know if anyone else can see that one. Um, so,
Yeah.
so, so I think the question there is about, how does it affect other technologies, right? So although we're a Microsoft focused partner, we do have skills and capability across other technologies. And as I mentioned, one thing that I will never try and enforce on a customer is to say that the only answer is Microsoft because I'm in the Microsoft ecosystem, right? It is about making sure it's the right technology for the right purpose. So part of those assessments that we do is looking at what the organization used today, making sure that the technology that we potentially might be proposing is the right fit. Oftentimes, Microsoft gets cross with us because oftentimes we'll say Microsoft isn't the answer. So really, I think for me, coming back to your question, is about helping customers to make informed decisions,
Yeah.
and it's about looking at what is the right solution as an enabler for an outcome.
And for the people here then, considering, well, how are they going to take what they've got today and get more value from it? What might you suggest would be the first steps then? I mean, you've alluded to something there, but what are the first steps,
Very,
do you think?
very, very controversial yet. And again, if Microsoft listens to this afterwards, I do apologize. It's starting with the technology that you already have. Again, I think for a lot of customers, they don't realize how much access to technology they already have. For example, if you're on an E5 license, the access that you have to Power Platform already, to Dataverse already, start with what you've got. Really try and make sure that have you actually looked at the investments that you have and drive maximum return out of those investments before you start actually enhancing and adding on to it. Now, oftentimes, again, just being very transparent, oftentimes you do need to put your hand in your pocket and actually spend additional money, but start with what you've got.
And what if those organizations, or if, as an organization, you don't have the internal capabilities to assess your environment or to bring on new technology and get value from it? What advice would you give to those who don't quite have, or they can't as advanced in the skill set?
Yeah, so for me, the first thing is that I think oftentimes what I see a lot of authorities do is outsource it straight away. And sometimes I think there's other options. Can you invest in apprenticeship programs? Can you start developing skill sets in-house? Can you work with a partner to actually work with you as a team rather than being a supplier? I think all of those things, I think for me is really important. So first of all, have you got the capability to build up skill set in-house to own these systems? And I know there's a lot of partners that will try and actually be that partner going forward for long term, etc. And sometimes that is the right model for some authorities, but not always. And like I say, so if you can own and manage the systems internally, look at that as an option. Work with partners like HSO, where we can actually upskill existing skill set and resources internally. If not, like I say, it's getting somebody to come and work with you as part of your team, not just as a supplier.
Well, so I can't see there's questions come up. I've answered to a couple of them that have come through before. So there's okay, Andrew has posted up here. So how might the initial steps of Power Platform, primarily automated, be explored while balancing control, governance of central IT and data management? This might include a shift to consumption-based use, which could be hard to predict.
Yeah, Andrew, for me, the foundation of that question is, have you got the right knowledge in-house? I think for me, that's the starting point. And, building up that knowledge, Microsoft, and I don't know, Michael, if we have the link around some of the Microsoft events, Microsoft do provide fundamental in a day sessions quite often, where again customers can develop some of that skill set in-house. But again, it's the what don't you know question for me. I've seen a lot of customers go down the route of saying, we'll just jump straight in, we'll start building some stuff. Oftentimes, that can lead into a bit of a dead end, or it can lead to a bit of disaster. I know there's an example of an authority not very long ago where the governance in place and there was a data leak, so not very good. If you think about, the focus on cybersecurity, again, making sure that you do things in a very secure way, really important. So start with making sure that you have the right information to be able to make those right decisions. So Power Platform, phenomenal tool set. If you don't want to go big bang with it, look at that productivity suite. Get IT to lock it down, empower individual users inside the organization to do some basic productivity apps, for example, doing some simple automations stuff. I talked about the use case around invoice automation, but also even more simple than that. Maybe you just want to have a use case where, you start automating just saving of files into, for example, SharePoint, etc. So really start small, test the use cases. And then finally, if you haven't got the resources or the skill set in-house, make sure that you work with a trusted partner.
So hopefully that answered the question, Andrew.
And what I will also say, don't be shy on leaning on Microsoft. I know Microsoft is quite heavily partner focused, but don't be shy in terms of leaning onto Microsoft as well. They will help if they can.
Am I right? Am I right in saying? Yeah, I say this as I know the answer. Am I right in saying that Microsoft will support in discovery programs, for example, if as one of these authorities may want to look deeper into Microsoft technology, they do actually sponsor some of these sessions.
That's what I was hinting at, Michael, without saying it. But let me be let me be explicit around that one. And again, the caveat comes, subject to approval. I think most folks on the call hopefully have heard that many times from Microsoft, but absolutely spot on. Microsoft do have what they call an end customer incentive fund. So they do have a fund available for customers, and they can help doing some of the discovery work upfront and actually pay for it as well. It's not always possible. Like I say, there's normally a couple of caveats around that one, and the biggest one being subject to approval. But again, don't be shy to go to Microsoft and say, we're looking at exploring X. Can you support us? Which includes actually engaging with potentially a partner as well to fund it.
Yeah, we can certainly help support that that request as well if you want to ask us, because we do tend to work with the right people.
Absolutely.
Okay. No other questions on as far as I can see. So yeah, I think we can wrap this up, Andy.
We might be able to give folks some time back, and I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I always enjoy getting a little bit of time back. You think you've been committed for an hour, but you get away with 45 minutes. Again, what I would just want to emphasize, I did go through those slides very quickly. There was a lot of content. I was scared I was going to run out of time. By all means, please don't be shy to follow up if there's any questions afterwards. If there's anything we can help with, like I say, even just for exploratory information purposes, reach out. We are to support where we can. Yeah. And again, I'll sort of just a reminder, the Microsoft Government Accelerator, there's an open invitation there. Anybody that does want to explore that as part of the engagement at South Coast Council, please give me a shout. I'm like I say, happy to do the intros and happy to just to see whether that's something that can support somebody.
Cool. And just to let everyone know who didn't join at the very beginning, I will share the slides and I will share the recording. If not this afternoon, then it'll definitely be by the morning. And as Andy highlights there, if there's anything within the content that Andy's talked about today, anything you hear in the recording, anything that you pick up on the slides, anything you see and anything that we're sending around, ask us to help you. I don't know, whatever it is, request to Microsoft, want to dig into detail in terms of the business process accelerators, or look into how you can get more value from data or your existing Microsoft stuff. Just ask us. We can help, and we're pretty good guys. I hope you have found from today's session. So with that, yeah, most of us anyway. With that, we'll give you 15 minutes back. Enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your Friday off and your long weekends. And thank you once again for joining HSO, myself, Michael, and Andy for today's session.
Appreciate the time, guys. Thank you.